All right, so today we're going to be looking at something pretty mind-bending. We're going to be diving into this Google DeepMind paper.
Okay.
It's about this idea of Socratic learning. And just to set the stage,
Yeah.
imagine like a closed system completely cut off from the outside world.
Right.
Kind of like, a group of philosophers locked in a room for like thousands of years just debating with each other.
Okay.
Could they reach like a superhuman level of intelligence?
Interesting.
Just through this like recursive self-improvement.
So using language is like the input and the output.
Exactly.
I like it.
So that's what we're diving into with this DeepMind paper.
Sounds good.
And I guess the big question here is that even possible?
Right.
Can you achieve this like boundless improvement in a closed system?
That's the question, isn't it?
And what are the limitations?
Yeah.
So let's unpack this paper
Okay.
and see what we can learn.
Awesome.
So the paper starts out by outlining 3 conditions that have to be met for any self-improvement system to work.
Right.
The first one is feedback.
Right.
Now, I get that feedback is important for learning.
Yeah.
But how does that even work in a closed system?
That's talent.
Like, isn't external validation kind of the whole point of feedback?
So the feedback can only come from within the system itself.
So it's like designing a test that grades itself.
Exactly.
But the answers are also, like, evolving as it goes.
Yeah, and that's where it gets tricky.
So how do you make sure the system doesn't, like, start gaming the system?
Right. Or develop biases.
Yeah, like, how do you keep it on track?
It's a really interesting problem.
Yeah, so it's not just about giving feedback.
Yep.
It's about making sure that the feedback is still valid, even as the system changes.
I got it.
Okay, what about the second condition?
The second condition is coverage.
Coverage, okay.
Yeah. It's all about making sure the system doesn't get stuck.
So it needs to, like, keep exploring new possibilities.
Exactly. Even within that closed system.
It can't just get tunnel vision.
Right. Like in our philosopher example.
Yeah.
They can't just debate the same old questions over and over.
They need to come up with new stuff.
Exactly.
New ideas, new schools of thought.
You got it.
So how do you make sure that happens?
Well, the paper suggests a pretty interesting approach.
Okay.
They talk about using language games.
Language games.
Yeah, these are like structured interactions with rules
Okay.
and a scoring system.
So it's like giving our philosophers a game to play
Exactly.
with winners and losers.
Yeah, and that gives them a way to generate new ideas.
And to get feedback on their performance.
Exactly.
Okay, so building on this idea of needing feedback and coverage,
Mm-hmm.
the third condition is scale.
Scale. Yeah, that's where it gets really fascinating.
And this is where I think it gets interesting too, because
Go on.
if you think about the bitter lesson of AI research,
Right.
it basically says that as computing power increases,
Yeah.
a lot of our limitations become kind of irrelevant.
Like they don't matter as much anymore.
Exactly. So even if Socratic learning seems inefficient right now,
Right.
what if we have like a ton of computing power?
Practically unlimited resources.
Yeah, like what if we can brute force intelligence?
It's a really different way of thinking about AI.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, instead of focusing on algorithms,
Yeah.
we focus on scale.
It's almost like that saying, quantity has a quality all its own.
I like that.
So this paper is saying, let's not worry about today's constraints.
Okay,
Let's think about what's theoretically possible.
push the boundaries.
Exactly, all right? I'm hooked.
Good.
Tell me more about these language games.
Okay.
How do they actually drive this learning process?
So imagine our philosophers.
Yeah.
They're not just debating randomly.
Uh-uh.
They're playing these games with specific rules.
Okay.
And each game has a scoring system that gives them feedback.
So it's like they're competing,
Exactly.
and then the winner gets a point or something.
Yeah. And that point tells them they're on the right track.
It's like a signal that their argument was successful.
Precisely.
Okay, so through playing these games over and over,
Uh-huh.
the system generates a bunch of data.
Right. All their moves, the outcomes, the scores.
And it can use that data to get better,
to refine its strategy.
to understand the game more deeply.
Exactly.
But wouldn't limiting the system to just one game,
Yeah.
like, wouldn't that constrain its potential?
That's a great point.
It seems like it would create a very narrow form of intelligence.
You're absolutely right.
So what's the solution?
The paper suggests that we need a variety of language games.
Okay, so not just one game.
Right. If the agent only plays one game, it might become a master of that game.
But it won't be able to apply that knowledge to other situations.
Exactly. It needs to be exposed to different rules, different objectives.
So variety is key.
Absolutely. It's like a mental gym for AI.
I like that analogy.
Each game is a different piece of equipment,
Yeah.
targeting different cognitive muscles.
Okay, so we've got these 3 conditions for self-improvement.
feedback, coverage, and scale.
Right, and we've got these language games that can help achieve those conditions.
Within a closed system?
But are there any fundamental limits?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Like, can we really expect this system to just keep getting smarter and smarter?
And eventually reach superhuman intelligence.
Yeah. Is that even possible?
That's where the paper gets really interesting.
Okay.
It argues that the biggest hurdles are alignment and open-endedness.
Okay, let's break those down.
Sure.
What do we mean by alignment in this context?
It means making sure the system's goals are aligned with our own.
Oh, okay, so we don't want it to, like, go rogue.
Exactly. We can't just step in and correct it if it starts doing something we don't like.
Because it's a closed system.
Right. We have to design it from the ground up to be inherently aligned with our values.
It's like sending our philosophers off to their thought experiment room and hoping they don't accidentally invent some crazy philosophy.
We need some safeguards.
Exactly. So how do we do that?
Well, the paper suggests a pretty cool idea.
Okay.
They call it a metacritic.
A metacritic.
Yeah, it's like a higher level judge
Okay.
that evaluates which language games are beneficial.
Oh, I see. So it's like a quality control system.
Exactly. To
Yeah.
make sure the system is staying on track.
But who designs the Metacritic?
That's the tricky part.
And how do we make sure that it's aligned with our goals?
It's like a recursion problem.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, and the paper acknowledges that this is a really hard problem.
It sounds like a headache.
It is, but it's a necessary one.
Okay, so alignment is a major issue.
Uh-huh.
What about this open-endedness problem?
Right. How can a closed system produce limitless growth?
It seems like a paradox.
It does, doesn't it?
Like you're limited by definition.
Yeah. But the paper suggests that the key is recursion,
Recursion. Okay.
giving the agent more and more control over its own learning process.
So we're not just talking about the agent getting better at the existing games.
No.
We're talking about it being able to create new games.
Exactly. Imagine our philosophers not only mastering existing schools of thought,
Yeah.
but creating entirely new ones,
Whoa.
expanding the very boundaries of philosophy.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is, isn't it?
And a little scary.
It raises some important questions about control.
Yeah. What happens when we create something that can design its own learning?
We need to think carefully about the potential consequences.
Definitely. It sounds like the Socratic learning concept.
Yeah.
It opens up a Pandora's box of ethical considerations.
It does, but that's part of what makes it so fascinating.
We're essentially talking about creating an intelligence that could surpass our own.
And doing it in a way that allows it to evolve autonomously.
So where do you land on this?
That's a good question.
Is boundless self-improvement in a closed system really achievable?
The paper makes a strong theoretical argument,
What?
but as we've discussed, there are a lot of challenges.
Alignment coverage? Open-endedness?
Those are all big hurdles.
It sounds like we're just scratching the surface here.
This is still a very new area of research.
But even if we never achieve true Socratic learning, just thinking about these ideas,
It pushes the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
it forces us to ask some fundamental questions.
About intelligence, about knowledge about the future of AI.
It's like our philosophers in their endless debate,
Exactly.
even if they never reach the ultimate truth.
The journey itself is incredibly valuable.
And that's what makes this whole field so exciting.
Absolutely, we're constantly pushing the limits of what we know.
Who knows what we'll discover next?
That's the beauty of it.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the possibilities of Socratic learning.
And its implications for the future of AI.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
Keep those minds curious.
Absolutely. So these language games are really fascinating.
Yeah, tell me more.
They're like the training ground for Socratic learning,
Okay.
but they're also the feedback mechanism.
I don't quite follow.
So each game has these rules, right?
Right.
And a scoring system
Uh-huh.
that give the agent feedback on how well it's doing.
So it's like our philosophers are having this big debate,
Exactly.
and whoever wins the argument gets a point.
Right, and that point is their feedback.
It tells them they're on the right track.
It's like a signal that their argument was successful or insightful.
Okay, I get it.
And by playing these games over and over again,
Yeah.
the system generates all this data.
Like all the moves they made, the outcomes, the score.
Exactly, and it can analyze that data to learn and improve.
So it's like practicing and getting feedback all at the same time.
Precisely.
But wouldn't it be a problem if the agent only played one game?
You think you would become too specialized.
Yeah, like it would be really good at that one game, but not very adaptable.
You're absolutely right.
So how do you prevent that?
That's where the need for a variety of language games comes in.
Okay, so we need lots of different games.
Exactly. If the agent only plays one game, it might become a master of that game. But its ability to generalize that knowledge to other situations would be limited.
So it's like if our philosophers only debated one specific topic.
They become experts in that area,
But
but they might miss out on other important ideas.
so variety is important for keeping things open-ended?
Exactly. We need to expose the agent to different rules, different objectives.
That makes sense.
Think of it like a mental gymnasium for AI.
Oh, I like that.
Each language game is a different piece of equipment,
Targeting different cognitive muscles.
for say,
Okay, so we've talked about the 3 conditions for self-improvement.
feedback coverage scale
Right, and we've discussed how language games can help us achieve those conditions.
within a closed system.
But I'm still wondering about the limits of this whole concept.
You mean the limits of Socratic learning itself?
Yeah, like how far can this really go?
Can we really expect this system to achieve boundless self-improvement?
And reach like superhuman intelligence.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. So what does the paper say about that?
Well, it argues that the biggest challenges are ensuring alignment
Okay.
and achieving true open-endedness.
Alignment and open-endedness.
Got it. These are the 2 big hurdles that we need to overcome.
All right, let's take them one at a time.
Sure.
What do we mean by alignment in this context?
It means making sure that the system's goals stay aligned with our own.
Oh, okay. So we don't want it to like develop its own goals.
That might be harmful to us.
Exactly. Like it can't just go off and do its own thing.
We need to make sure it's working towards what we want.
So it's like we're giving our philosophers all this freedom to think.
But we don't want them to come up with some dangerous ideas.
Right. Like we need to make sure their thinking is still aligned with our values.
Exactly. We have to design the system from the ground up
To be inherently safe.
and beneficial to humanity.
That sounds really challenging.
It is. But the paper offers a potential solution.
Oh, what's that?
They call it a metacritic.
A metacritic? What is that?
It's like a higher level judge that evaluates which language games are beneficial.
So it's kind of like a quality control system for the whole learning process.
Exactly. Make sure the system is staying on track.
But who designs this metacritic?
That's a great question.
And how do we make sure that it stays aligned with our goals?
It's like a recursive problem.
Yeah, we're just pushing the problem up a level.
And the paper acknowledges that this is a really tough issue.
It sounds like a major headache.
It is, but it's a headache we need to solve.
Okay, so alignment is one big hurdle.
What about the other one?
Open-endedness.
Right. How can we create a system that can achieve limitless growth?
Even though it's confined to a closed system.
That seems like a paradox.
It does, doesn't it?
But the paper suggests that the answer lies in recursion.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's about giving the agent more and more control over its own learning process.
So instead of just getting better at the existing games?
It can actually start to design new games.
Wow, that's a whole other level.
It is imagine our philosophers not only mastering existing schools of thought,
Yeah.
but creating entirely new ones.
So they're not just playing the game.
They're changing the game.
That's incredible.
It is, and it raises some really interesting questions about control.
Yeah, like what happens when we create a system that can design its own learning challenges?
We need to be very careful about the potential consequences.
It sounds like this Socratic learning concept.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, on the one hand, it's this amazing possibility.
Potential for boundless self-improvement.
But on the other hand,
There are these huge ethical challenges.
it's like we're opening up a Pandora's box.
We are, and we need to be prepared for what might come out.
So it's almost like they're meta-learning. You know, they're learning how to learn.
Exactly. They're not just acquiring knowledge. They're developing the ability to acquire knowledge in new and potentially unforeseen ways.
It's like giving those philosophers the power to invent their own branches of philosophy.
And the tools to explore those branches in ways we can't even imagine right now.
That's both exciting and kind of scary, isn't it?
It definitely raises some big questions about control. You know, like if we create a system that can design its own learning challenges, how do we ensure that those challenges don't lead it down some path we don't want?
Right, it's like we're giving it the keys to the car, but we're not entirely sure where it's going to drive.
And the paper acknowledges that this is one of the biggest open questions in the field of AI. How do we balance this potential for open-ended growth with the need for safety and alignment with human values?
It seems like this whole Socratic learning thing, it's like opening a Pandora's box, you know?
Yeah, it's full of possibilities.
But also potential dangers.
We're essentially talking about creating an intelligence that could potentially surpass our own, and we're doing it in a way that gives it a lot of autonomy.
So where do you stand on this after all this research and deep thinking?
Well, I think the paper makes a really compelling case that boundless self-improvement in a closed system is theoretically possible.
Okay, but
But as we've discussed, there are some massive challenges that need to be addressed.
like alignment and coverage and this whole open-endedness problem.
Exactly. These aren't just technical challenges. They're fundamental questions about the nature of intelligence and how we control it.
It feels like we're still in the very early stages of exploring this concept.
We are. It's like we've just scratched the surface of vast and uncharted territory.
But even if we never achieve true Socratic learning, even if it turns out to be impossible,
I still think there's immense value in exploring these ideas.
it forces us to confront some really deep questions about what it means to be intelligent and how we might create intelligences that are different from our own.
And that's what makes this whole field so fascinating. We're constantly pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible,
It's like those philosophers locked in their endless debate.
even if they never reach the ultimate truth.
The journey itself is incredibly enriching.
It is, and that's what keeps us coming back for more.
Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the possibilities of Socratic learning and its implications for the future of AI. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.